Hi everyone, it's Marissa, and I'm live again today, like I mentioned, to talk about a little bit more about our relationship with food and our mindset. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about emotional eating, which is pretty common, and a lot of people maybe don't even realize that they're emotional eaters, and they are, and they can't figure out like why do they feel sick all the time because they're eating so much, and why do they feel like they're whoops, sorry guys, I'm trying to see if I can see you guys. Hi Carolyn. Okay, so one of the things that we can do when we're emotional eaters is we can eat when we're anxious, we can eat when we're sad, disappointed, angry, when you're bored, lonely, when you're stressed out. You can even overeat, or you can even emotionally eat when you're excited, which has like a kind of a similar feeling to anxiety. And so why do we emotionally eat? So it's not, there's like it's kind of a physiological response, right? So our bodies, when we're stressed or we're disappointed, they kind of fill with negative chemicals, just things that are stress hormones and things like that. And it's natural for us to use food. Hi, Carolyn. It's natural for us to use food in order to soothe our emotions, because food produces, any type of food, whether it be sugar or not, produces positive chemicals in our brains and has us feel good. And so we can really use food to avoid emotions in a couple of ways. So the first is to check out or numb our emotions. So we can eat in order to really stuff down our emotions. So again, like that's, you have a really stressful day and all of a sudden you're like, I need chocolate or I need ice cream. And you can definitely use that food to, just kind of zone out and not pay attention to like what's going on, or not really dealing with the emotion that you have. Now, the second one is a form of control, and we don't really think about this one as often, but we can use food to control or feel like our lives aren't falling, that aren't, hi Grant and Victor. We can use food as a way to like focus our attention away from an emotion. So for example, when you're eating, you're trying to eat perfectly, let's say. You're like, okay, I'm going to eat perfectly today. It's kind of a way to avoid maybe feeling like life's falling apart or that you can't handle the stress. And so you're like, at least I have my food in check. At least I can keep my food together, and I can eat that perfectly. And so that means it keeps you from feeling like overwhelmed or frustrated with yourself. So those are kind of the two ways, and we don't think about it as often, but for example, a lot of people who struggle with anorexia, they have, an obsession, or if you've struggled with anorexia in the past, you have an obsession with eating perfectly or not eating as a form of control. It's a way that you're keeping yourself from being able to deal with, or having to deal with an emotion, maybe of not feeling worthy or not feeling good enough by using food. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 little kind of, I guess what you would say, like little ways that we, patterns that we have in our lives that also translate into our food. And so when you like get the opportunity to shift your relationship with food, you can also shift that in your life. So one of those ways is being a people pleaser eater. And so someone who's a people pleaser eater means that you're someone who never turns down food. You can never turn down a meal, an offering. You're going to take it if you're hungry or not, and you're going to eat whatever someone gives to you, even if it's not something that sounds good to you. You eat on other people's schedules. You eat what other people want rather than what you want. So if you go to dinner with someone and you split a meal, you may choose to split that, you're like, oh, sure, go ahead, have whatever you want. I'm not going to choose. And that is really the same thing. That's people pleasing. You're trying to keep them happy rather than doing what might feel good for you or your body. So if you think about that, where does that also happen in your life? Where do you also people please, or where are you stepping over things that you want in order for, other people to be happy. Okay, so the second one is being a guilty eater. And Victor, you said you're a stress eater. Okay, so a guilty eater, it means that you feel really guilty about eating certain foods. And you're so focused on feeling guilty that you're eating something and you can't stop. Once it reaches a certain amount, you're eating to check out from feelings, from the actual feeling of feeling guilty. So you say, screw it, and I've already failed, so I'm just going to eat a lot of this. And so you end up overeating whatever it is that you think that you shouldn't eat. And that's really like, there's kind of two things that are happening. One is you feel guilty for the first place for, let's say, having a slice of pizza when you're like, pizza shouldn't be good for me. So you feel really guilty about it, and then you're like, I shouldn't be eating this, I shouldn't be eating this, I shouldn't be eating this. And then you're like, I don't want to feel guilty anymore, so you keep eating in order to not feel guilty. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Hector. Thanks for coming on. You end up eating more of the piece of pizza, rather than just having one. Okay, so the next one is a rebellious eater, which means that you eat something just because someone tells you that you shouldn't. You're more likely to eat foods that you don't want to and in higher quantities just because someone tells you that they're not good for you, or you should watch your weight, or something like that. I know that can be really common for a lot of people. So someone says you're out to dinner with your family and your mom says, like, are you sure you should have that much, mayonnaise on your sandwich? And you're like, well, I'll show you. I'm going to have a lot of mayonnaise on my sandwich, and you just totally overfill it, and you're like, and I'm going to have chips, and I'm going to have, even if that wasn't really what you wanted to have. So that's being a rebellious eater. Okay, and the next one is a perfectionist eater. So this is someone, and this is probably most common, and this also translates into your life. So, you eat really, really perfectly. So no one ever has to tell you what to eat, because when things are going great in your life, you're eating perfectly. Everything's, together, and you have it all together, and you're like, I'm only going to have a salad and then have the dressing on the side. But the problem is that once you cheat, or once it becomes not perfect, you're more likely to overindulge. You say screw it, and you go full force. So it's kind of like this big, it's like a seesaw. So you're doing really great and everything's perfect in your life and you feel really good and you're eating perfectly, and then all of a sudden the seesaw switches and you have something that you feel like you shouldn't eat and you just go for a crazy binge. And so that's a perfectionist eater. And so, hey Sam, thanks for joining. So when we are perfectionists in our life, similarly, the same thing happens. Like, everything's going great. If everything's going your way and meeting your expectations, then life feels good, and you feel really great, and it's easy to stay on track. And as soon as one thing goes wrong, it feels like you slide the other way, and all of a sudden you feel like things are totally out of control, or you're failing, right? Or that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, all of that. The same thing kind of comes up with your eating habits. Okay, and then the last one is a super, Dominic. Hi, Dominic. You sugar and sweets too much sometimes. Yeah, you're not giving it to yourself enough. Sometimes it's good to have a treat every once in a while. Otherwise, we get really addicted to it. I was definitely addicted to sugar because I wasn't supposed to have it. It was a guilty pleasure. And so when I did have sugar, it was like, well, I'm just going to eat a lot. I think I can't remember if I shared this on Tuesday, but I used to have this thing where I would buy a carton of ice cream, and I'd be like, well, I don't want to keep eating ice cream the rest of the month, so I may as well just finish the whole carton now. Don't ask me what logic that is. It makes absolutely no sense at all, but I would finish the carton of ice cream in 2 days and then not have any for the rest of the week. And again, this is all in your mindset of what's bad and what's good, and having that perfectionist, like I either have to be having none or I have to have all of it at once. And so really you can start to look and see at like where that kind of impacts our eating habits. Okay, so the next one is a superhero eater, and that was me for sure. I was a So superhero eaters, you're the person who's always on the go. You're always running from one place to the next. You're eating in the car, in front of your computer, at your desk. You're always overeating because you're not paying attention, and you don't even like know that something is gone until you like look in the bag and it's already empty, right? So that was me. I used to stress eat dried mango slices, and I'd be sitting, they're not the worst thing in the world for you, but it's too much. The bags are $10, and I used to go through a whole bag in one night where I'd just be sitting there eating out of the bag because I'm stressed and wanted to chew on something and not even paying attention to what I'm eating. And what happens when we're doing that is we don't get the signal that your stomach is full to go to your brain, or you don't get the satisfaction of the taste, like I'm actually done with having so much mango. Our taste buds actually give us like a little signal when we pay attention. So for example, if you've ever experienced having like food, the first bite tastes really great, and when you start to get full, the last bite doesn't taste so good. And that's the same thing. That's our body's signal that we're done. That's our body's signal that we don't need anymore, that we shouldn't have anymore. And so we don't pay attention to that when you're a superhero eater. You're on the go so much that you're not even getting the signals because you're not mindful enough. So one of the ways that you can work on all of these different areas to make sure that you're not overeating and you're not making poor food choices because of your mindset is really to bring mindfulness to your eating. So it's about bringing awareness. So like, this isn't a really great choice for me. I wonder why I'm making it. And then the other piece of that is slowing down, really allowing yourself to taste your food, really getting connected to if it's something that you want. And if it's not, if it doesn't taste good to you, then don't eat it. If it's not something that's like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want, then you shouldn't eat it, because what's likely to happen is that when you eat something that you don't like, you're actually still going to desire food. You're still going to be more hungry. You're still going to want to keep eating anyways afterwards, even if you're done with your dinner. But if it wasn't satisfying, if it wasn't really what you wanted, you're more likely to keep having it. Okay, so hi Gilbert, thanks for coming on. I'll give you an example. So I remember when I became an intuitive eater, you have permission to eat whatever you want. And I was like, thanks Dominic. I was in a personal development program. And for those of you Landmark people, I'm at the Landmark Center. And I look in the convenience machine and I'm like, oh my gosh, they have these chocolate donuts that reminded me of my childhood. So my grandfather used to always have those like Hostess powdered donuts or the chocolate covered donuts. And I was like, oh, I have to have one of those. Like, those sound so good. I'm gonna have one. So I actually opened it and I got one and I tasted it, and it wasn't actually as good as I thought it was gonna be. And I was like, that's interesting. I used to love these things as kids. Like, why doesn't this taste good? And I ended up even like wanting to try another bite. So I had another bite. Hi Libby, thanks for joining. So I actually had another bite of the donut, and I was like, wow, this doesn't taste good at all. This is really not tasty. It didn't taste anything like what I thought it was going to. And so I ended up throwing the rest of the donuts away. And this happens to a lot of my clients. So for example, maybe they like fast food and they have this thing with fast food and they're always eating fast food. And once they become mindful and they're actually, hi Amanda, once they become mindful and they're eating, they're actually paying attention to what they eat, they don't like fast food anymore. They actually get to taste it and realize that it's not something that they enjoy. They start to notice that it's something that they, were eating to numb an emotion, or it was something that they weren't even paying attention to because they were eating so fast or because they felt guilty about it. And so they, when they started to use mindfulness and they started to actually, put the food in their mouth, slow down, taste their food, they realized that fast food wasn't really something that they wanted. Hi, Amanda. So those are the different ways that our emotions, our emotions or even our mindset really has us eat more food than we're, eat more food or choose things that our body doesn't even really want. So I'll go over, let's see again, so those are people pleaser eaters. So check in this week. Are you a people pleaser eater? Do you eat things just because people offer them to you? And how does that show up in your life? Are you also a people pleaser with other things? Are you a guilty eater? Do you feel really guilty about the foods that you eat? And maybe you also feel guilty about the way that you interact with people, or have a general feeling of guilt all the time. Are you a rebellious eater? So do you do things or eat things because someone told you not to? Or are you a perfectionist eater? So everything has to be in order for you to feel good, and has to be right on schedule and right on time. Or are you a superhero eater and just eating fast and on the go and not paying attention, not mindful at all? So anyways, thanks for jumping on today, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And I will be back on next Tuesday. I might make the time a little bit later, but I'll be back on next Tuesday to talk about our relationship with our body and food, and some of the physiological. All right, Gilbert, you're guilty eater and perfectionist. Yep, it happens. I think I've had all of them before in my lifetime, before I became an intuitive eater. So I'll be back on next Tuesday, and I'll be talking about our relationship with our body. So how do we properly listen to our body? What is it actually trying to tell us? Why do we overeat or crave sugar? What are the signals and cues that our body is that we're ignoring? I'm going to talk a little bit about body image as well, and how that impacts your eating habits. And then the following week, I'll be talking about spirit and our relationship with food. So where is your lifestyle, your alignment, what's going on in your life related to your eating habits? Okay, I hope you have a really awesome day and evening, and I will see you all soon. Bye.